Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Wicked for Good, the sequel film currently in theaters, and I've got two guests. First, happy to welcome back film editor Myron Kerstein. Great to see you again, Myron.
Great to see you too, Skid. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you back. Also happy to welcome, making his Below the Line debut, visual effects supervisor Pablo Helman. Glad you could join us, Pablo.
Thanks, Skid. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be fun. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers. Quick bit of self-promotion up front. We recorded a podcast last year about the first film, Wicked, with Myron and choreographer Christopher Scott. If you're a fan of Wicked but new to Below the Line, you'll probably enjoy that episode as well. It was season 21, episode 7. We noted last time that principal photography for both Wicked and Wicked for Good was integrated. Maybe you guys have a better word for that. In any case, let's start today's conversation by reminding everyone what that meant in practice.
Go ahead, Pablo.
Well, what it means is that there is a huge collaboration effort between all the different parts. And in this case, because we're talking about for good, we have been working together for about 3 years. So this has been about 4 years to 5 years effort for some of us. So that means that we can finish, everybody's each other's sentences. that we know each other's looks and needs and also that we appreciate everybody's contribution to the project. So with Jon's leadership, we all sit down in dailies and we take a look at the work and we collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, look, to work on anything over the course of 3 years, of course, you're going to just get to know your collaborators really well. And, we just spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours together over the last 3 years in rooms together, talking about ideas and world building and trying to figure out how to, everything from character development to animation of feelings with animals. And it's just just unlike any other collaboration I've ever experienced working with Pablo and ILM and Framestore and our other VFX vendors. I have to say it was just it was just something off the bucket list to work with ILM because, of course, as a kid growing up with Star Wars, Lucas and Spielberg and just always wanting to work on films like that and then get to work on the biggest two films around and then to work with Pablo, who's just worked with everybody.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Not just George Lucas, but also Scorsese in the last, 5 years. And so I just, it was just a pinch me moment to be able to work and learn from the best. And then that they're also interested in anything that I have to say at all is amazing. And so I'm just incredibly thankful for the experience of working with these incredible artists. I wanted to be a matte painter when I was growing up. I used to make these photorealistic drawings and I was actually doing architecture. I was planning to be an architect at one point, and then when that didn't work out, I thought I was going to be a matte painter. To then work on Wicked, and you're working with the best, just dazzling me week after week. I tried to act cool in those meetings, and but what I was really was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here.
You know what? I mean, it's all the way around. I mean, I think that. I think one of the things that I've learned in about 30 years in this industry is that it's about the people that you work with, and there's usually three things: there's a project, the people, and the resources. And in this, you're really lucky if you get one of those. In our case, I think we all we all get a high out of working with each other. I think we all learn, and the other thing that I know for sure is that you never stop learning from the people that you work with. You kind of stand on each other's shoulders, to tell a story.
Well, Pablo, I want to follow up on that because, as we've established here, Myron, you have a history with director Jon Chu over a series of films. I know several of his other collaborators are repeating for these movies as well. But Pablo, so what's it like joining this team? How do you integrate with these folks who do know each other so well? But in some sense, you're the new kid on the block, despite the history and the expertise that you bring to the work.
You mean the age? I'm the oldest one. So I think it's really important. I do a lot of listening, especially at the beginning, because I need to figure out what what the vision is of the project that I'm working on, and everybody's contribution, and how open Jon is to listening and to collaborate. I mean, there's different processes. I mean, none of them is better than the other. Everybody's different. So I did a lot of listening and realized Jon is completely open to collaboration. He's got an open thinking of the whole thing. I mean, yes, he's got an incredible vision, but he's opening to, moving, to the left or to the right or to down or up. At the same time, that we all do that, we all learn from each other as to what kind of, movie kind of develops in front of us. And I found myself being welcomed into the dialogue, which is great. I think I probably, after a vacation, I would probably do it all over again. But we all need a vacation.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, what I love about Jon is he's a collector of people. And he had worked with Alice Brooks, her cinematographer, back in like film school, and Chris Scott, our choreographer, for years. So I felt like I was the new kid on the block when he started working with me on Crazy Rich Asians, and I had a lot to prove in, trying to understand who he is and him trying to understand who I was. And it was no different with Pablo. We were like, okay, we now have this sort of visionary mad scientist who is going to be responsible for communicating to thousands of artists all over the world and making sure it does not get away from us. So he had a huge amount of responsibility, and we had to make sure that we got to know him and he got to know us. And, we're all like weirdos, we're just like, we're just just trying to okay, which part of the circus tent are you going to be like hanging out in? And what I loved about Pablo from the get-go was his weird sense of humor, and the fact that he liked to play music, and that he was just like this, like all of us, just this three-dimensional person with all their sort of ideas in their head, and they're trying to communicate to us, we're trying to communicate to them, and we just have to like figure each other out. And that takes some time, of course. And then you're on the other side of that, and you're just like, I wouldn't want it any other way.
I think the whole idea about visual effects, it is pretty daunting. And I realize, and I always say this to everybody, that Myron heard this before many times, is that visual effects is kind of contrary to kind of filmmaking in a sense, because everything happens in layers for us, and it takes a long time for us to get things done. And we're asking the director and the editor to turn over things that they might not be ready for. And everybody wants to work in continuity, but we're asking everybody to say, okay, well, just take a look at the end of the sequence. That's going to be probably the most difficult one. So we want to turn it over at the beginning of it so that it gives us enough time. It's like that is unheard of. So it takes a lot of getting used to it. And then also, I think visual effects, just like everybody, any other discipline, it has a nuance of brushes and tools that you have inside the discipline to do different things. So it's very difficult sometimes to be in dailies with everybody and saying, well, they're just coming up with an idea, or the director or the editor comes up with an idea, and then us having to explain, well, if we're going this way, that's going to take simulation, paint, asset building, painting, animation. It's like, what? I mean, filmmaking is used to just turn on the camera, you just say action, and then everything kind of happens. in front of you, not with us. It's like a layer kind of a way. And I realize that sometimes it's very frustrating. But being that this is a show that pretty much every shot is a visual effect shot, we all kind of accommodate and tolerate each other, kind of a thing.
Well, give me more insights into how the two of you work together, both in how it relates to the production that's actually happening, and then what's happening behind the scenes between editing and visual effects in parallel to the actual filming.
During production, Pablo's on set every single day. And whether it's, a day where there's going to be flying monkeys in the background, or there's a day where we're just painting, fixing makeup touches on Alphabet Skin, he's there every single day. And so when I visit set, he's right next to camera, and he's, because the second he leaves, that's when somebody needs something, of course. And so my interaction with Pablo was a little bit more limited during the production point, but there was moments where we were figuring things out on the fly, both in the first film and the second film, about the needs of production. So for example, in the first film, we had this big balloon chase sequence, and there was a moment where we thought that we could add some elements to it that would help the action as well as the VFX. So I'm working with my VFX editor, Ed Marsh, and then I'm working with Pablo and Kevin Ellum, our VFX producer, and trying to figure out what shots they want to do, or what shots should we pick up from a production standpoint. And so there is a little bit of integration there where we're all trying to help each other. That way, we don't make it more of a mess later on. And, again, we can almost fix anything, in post. These days it really is kind of almost limited by your imagination and budget and time. But there's this feeling of like, how can we come together? And then of course there's things that Pablo needed right away to just turn over, just to start working on environments, even if it was something that was going to be 3 years down the line until we see. It's just like, I just need exterior shots, so can you give me, or rather somebody on a balcony we're overlooking, Emerald City, just to get started on the development and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there are some things that jump out at you. Like, for instance, one of the first things that we shot about almost 4 years ago was The Girl in the Bubble, which is actually part of the second movie. But we knew that we needed tech viz, we needed previs, we needed to talk about how we are going to do this shot. And we knew that it's a super important thing that goes to editorial, because the shot is basically placed as one shot, but it's made up of 7, 8 plates of different things. Editorial, Myron's the one that needs to pick the best performances for everything, and then we start doing layout, and then we start doing, figuring out assets, match moving, and doing all this stitching that we needed to do. I'm providing, that all the reference mirror, plates are doing okay, and they need to be flopped, and there's all kinds of things that need to happen. So perfect example of editorial kind of like flexing a little bit and curving a little bit to get visual effects to work. And then yes, in terms of taking a look at, you say, okay, well, if you have 2,000 shots, how do you actually, and 1,000 visual effects artists and production people all over the world, how do you actually take a look at that? And you need to deliver in 2.5 years. How do you do that? Well, this is what Myron was saying. It's going to editorial and say, you know what, we need 3 city shots that are wide enough so that we can develop the asset this way. We need 1 shot of the lion so that we can develop the lion. We need this creature work. We need this tornado sequence, just maybe 1 shot. So it's picking and choosing. And then Myron saying, very, always putting us, the reality check, this might change, right? Yes. And we all know that, like I always say, the only one that likes change is a wet baby. So if you don't like change, probably this is not filmmaking. It's not something that you want to do.
I want to talk more about that scene since you brought it up, Pablo. That girl in the bubble. It's like 3.5 minutes. It's stitched together like a single shot. But as you mentioned casually, you go into a mirror, you come out, you've got the bubble itself. Myron, talk to me even, how do you even possibly edit that knowing there's so much work on the visual effects side? Like, how much back and forth is there? Like, even to make that scene come together, it seems an impossible feat.
I remember on the day that they shot that, and the idea was like they're going to pick all the takes on set, and those are going to be the takes, and we're going to make sure that the performance is the best performance, and that technically this is going to work. And on set, they're actually going to make a sort of a sketch of the stitches, and of course, every time production says we've picked all the takes, and it's all going to be exactly the way we planned it. If I had a dime for every time production told me that, I really would be a rich man. But you hope that in this case that they're right. But John Chu has a tendency of, on the day feeling one way, and then of course over the course of years, literally, you start to have a different idea of what performance feels more grounded, what might work technically. And even though we had an idea of what the big picture might look like, we were changing things pretty radically, pretty late. So there was some pressure. There was a lot of back and forth and negotiating with VFX. This was an example of where we really had to work together to see what we could actually pull off, not just from the time and money, but just the technical aspects of it, and making sure that our choices weren't going to be something that they couldn't deliver on. And so there was a negotiation, there was a back and forth. And then there was another side of this, which was the music component, because they had to support Ari's incredible performance. And so there's it looks so simple and beautiful and elegant when you see it, but the amount of work that went into it is phenomenal. It's a technical juggernaut right there in that 3.5 minutes.
And it is also about trust, because when it's very difficult for visual effects to put out a shot like that and to say to John or to Myron, don't worry about it, this is going to look fine. It's like, well, I don't know what that means, So yes, there were some changes there. There's a bunch of commodities there. There's money, resources, I would say. There's time, and there's the art part. And those kinds of things, art is infinite. It never stops. But resources and basically time resources stop first, and then time is the last one, because you run into a calendar, and that's the end of that. So at the end, if you change 2 takes, let's say, because there were some morphs in there in between takes that you cannot tell what it is, but we know where the bodies are buried, so we know where they are. But if you're going to change 2 or 3 takes, that means that the layout, the syncing of all that stuff needs to go back, and that is kind of like the first time. I don't know if you remember, that's the first time that we do. So, and that we did. So if that doesn't work, then we need to start calendaring all that stuff. And we did do some trade horses, there. But I think it worked out. And I think there's always that thing about our job as visual effects artists is to make the movie that the filmmaker wants to make. It's not to put hurdles in the middle of it. Just for us is to jump over them. And I think, we all do that. I appreciate, Myron and John coming on board with all that kind of stuff, because it could be, it could be off-putting,
Yeah, and Pablo was like, he never said no. Like, he never said no to us. He was just trying to wrap his head around about how he could actually accomplish it. And so I would say, is this about money? And he's like, it's not about money, it's about time. So I don't think we were, out of all our thousands of requests, was ever told no. It was just like, how do we accomplish this? And to make sure that there wasn't another solution to it, or either creatively or just from a production standpoint, how to pull it off. And so I love citing Girl in the Bubble for that reason, because it is a microcosm of the thousands of decisions that we make together in this what other it looks like a very simple sequence, but it is very much how we are always working together, that back and forth between editorial and VFX.
And I think also, when you're on set, you're making, you're putting, you're starting by pointing the camera in one direction. Then you have lighting, you have performance, you have depth of field, you have, all kinds of the camera movement, all kinds sequencing, all kinds of music that comes in, and then you relitigate that in post-production. Because now we have this thing. It's like, well, the focus. I wish I was just looking at the background and then racking to her. Can we do that? Well, yeah, you can change it. Well, you can change everything basically, and you have to rethink. I mean, in a way, it's a good thing, but in a way, it's not a good thing because you already made the decision. Now you're being presented with another choice. So it is a job, but I mean, I think, from my point of view, it's a great job to have. It's a very creative job. We all feel very creative. We all feel that we're making a difference. And basically we're doing it for the audience, yeah, because you're showing a piece of you can call it art, you can call it entertainment, you can call it both. But at the end of the day, when you are sitting in the back of a room, in a theater, and you're listening to everybody's reaction, and you getting everybody emotional and stuff, that's basically why you do what you do.
Now, obviously, our focus today is going to be on the interaction and the collaboration between editing and visual effects. But before we talk about some more specific scenes on that, I do want to take a step back and have you guys talk to me about your collaboration with some folks who are more focused on practical things. And I'm thinking of costume design and production design, both of which incredible amount of work for what they're doing. But how's that relationship work, knowing that what you guys are going to do, but what they're bringing you up front?
Well, they're bringing us the foundation of everything. So, we have shiz built, but it stops at, the 20th floor. And, Pablo takes it from there. And Paul Tazwell designs this incredible costume, but then the cape that Pablo and the team develops is its own character. And so I would say that, we take, and it's the same thing with the editorial. I take the foundation of everything, cinematography, production design, costume design, music, all as if it's like one big collage. And these are the things pouring into my mad scientist art studio. And then I'm making a bigger collage out of it, and I'm building from their work. And Pablo is building outwards. He gets to build the world. I won't speak for you, Pablo, but I just saw this incredible extension of what they were bringing to us as a foundation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of transaction and negotiation, when we all sit down, starting with Jon, on a model, a miniature model of what production design thinks that they are going to build or what's going to be in the movie. And we all sit around the table and say, okay, well, it's going to be 25 feet right here. Then from here on, I'll pick it up in visual effects and we'll do this or we'll do that. Same thing with Alice, and I always have said that I've seen a difference between a director looking on a complete blue screen where there is very little there. The choices that person makes are completely different than the choices that the person makes when they're on a set, where they're a building, when the light is coming from the right place, where all the costumes are where they need to be, and the creatures that we're putting in later on visual effects. There's a place for all of those. There's an animal unit that works, with real people that act like animals. Let's just say that are right there. So there is a lot of negotiation, and also everything is related to art and resources, because everybody has their own budget and their amount of resources, and everybody knows how much they can do of what. But I think lots of things change. Let's take, for instance, that scene where with the confetti, in the second movie.
Mhm.
It was something that came, organically out of looking at scenes and Jon saying, and Myron saying, we need confetti here to do a certain thing. Well, if we had known about that, we could have shot that in a sense. But because we're flexible enough and we're open to the movie being what it is, we can do that in visual effects and we can complete it. So yeah, there's a lot of negotiation and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's storytelling and it's about making sure, I think, Myron, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's about making sure that the audience knows where they are, why they're there, and why they're looking at a performance and how they're being affected by it.
Absolutely. It's funny, like, production on the day can't shoot confetti out of cannons and then slow it down. And then, and we're talking about, thank goodness, by the way, when Glenda is singing sort of internally, and on the stage show, the Broadway stage show, they have a spotlight that actually centers on Glinda, and so John wanted to create that effect with visual effects by slowing down confetti. And so that came very late in the game. I think that was one of the last things we ever did on the show. And trying to get that right was a real, like, incredible achievement, that it didn't take you out of the song, that you didn't suddenly feel like it's cheesy. And so that is a way of extending, everything that they're doing on the production side, but they would have never thought about it on the day necessarily. And so that is something that all these intangible things that we keep building on one another.
Let's dive into some specific scenes and you guys share with me the specific challenges you've faced. I'll name a couple. You guys can hop ahead with any favorites. Let's start with the opening sequence where they're building the yellow brick road. We've got these large horn creatures, and then Elphaba comes in flying and fighting, and right out the gate, I'm thinking, oh man, Myron and Pablo are busy.
Yeah, well, yeah, we are busy. I mean, we start with basically an empty field in the middle of England, where the lighting in England is very specific. There is sun some days, usually not what you wanted or where you want it. My philosophy always in terms of visual effects, when you're thinking about epic universes that you're trying to build, world building, is to give the actors as much as possible around them. And then let visual effects take over there because there's no way to do it any other way. So there was a yellow brick road. There were some animal people that were basically bison, and there were some yellow bricks right there and some guards. And then a lot of wire work for Cynthia because she does her own stunts, flying in without a cape because that's visual effects. But all the elements are there, you see. That's what Myron was saying, that at least 50%, 60% is already there. The camera knows where it's going because it's following the action. You do have a background with a horizon there so that you know where your camera is pointing. And then after that, basically becomes a visual effects party there, where with creatures at the same time you're developing the creatures, you're building them, you're creating hair simulation, rigs. Myron was talking about the cape. The cape is another thing. I mean, we've all worked on shows that the cape is a very important part of the character, but because the cape has to have a specific mass and materials, and there is gravity, obviously, and she's flying without gravity. The cape has to be, maybe the mass needs to be different than the real thing. So when we're doing the actual simulations, we're manipulating that. So, sometimes for editorial reasons, and maybe Myron, you can tell me this, but we need to cut from A to B really quickly. And it needs to go really fast. Elphaba needs to fly, and then we do the simulation, and the cape is going like. And why is that? It's because she's flying 700 miles an hour, and so
Yeah.
we cheat that a little bit to give it the character that it needs to. And then there is the editorial part of putting all that stuff together. When Myron takes a look at the creature work and asks for matches or actions or something that we're missing in something or in a shot, or maybe the angle needs to change.
Yeah, and it's, when I'm pitching Pablo like an aerial shot of, that's not a shot that the production was able to pull off. And so I will sort of try to describe to Pablo, well, this is what I'm thinking of, to create some suspense. And they have to sort of get into my head. And then I could pitch to John Chu, well, this is what I was thinking. It was like, I don't know if we need that shot. I was like, believe me, if they can pull off what I'm trying to communicate to Pablo, then this sequence is going to have a little extra special sort of mystery to it, as well as, establishing that opening scene was really challenging because we had to establish this apocalyptic feel and this new tone in which we were diving into Oz. And so there was so much heavy lifting that was going on with the sequence, just from a tonal reset for the audience. And then all the other stuff that comes in there, creating these incredible bisons, making sure that Elphaba is flying and the cape is behaving and all the bricks are in the right position and the steam and the haze, and it was so important to get right. And then Pablo's just saying, be patient. It's going to get there. Knowing that, again, we're working with the best, but, that fear of just like, oh my God, this has to work. It has to feel like a Batman sequence, and we have to forget that none of these animals exist and that they're all created by VFX, and that Elphaba is truly flying and that she is the superhero that we want her to be.
Sure. And I think a lot of it is about communication. Like Myron said, you have a limited amount of time to tell the audience where they are and why they're there. And so if you start with the camera craning down into a yellow brick road, where does the yellow brick road go? Does it go straight center screen? Does it go left or right? And then once it's there, do we put the Emerald City there? Originally, when we shot it, we didn't know that Emerald City was going to be there. We knew it was going to go somewhere, but we didn't know exactly where. So as the camera is craning down, you follow the yellow brick road. You find you have seen Emerald City in the back, and then you end up with the bison, and then you move on. So that's storytelling. That is the deliberate thing that you're doing, in which you're taking the time to be as efficient and proficient as possible to tell a specific story.
Myron, I've got a question for you. I know from our past conversations that your editing process can involve scouring through hours and hours of footage, selecting looks or angles, exploring the different ways a scene can come together. How does your process as an editor change, if at all, when you're working in this visual effects space?
Well, I try to not let VFX sort of, you don't want the tail wagging the dog. And so I was trying to be a good collaborator, but there was many times where I was just like, I have to cut the sequence the way I want to cut it and not be limited by the limitations, which there wasn't many, of VFX or the time or the money. And so I actually chose to basically just cut the scenes the way I was going to cut them. And then I think the learning curve for me was just knowing that, there was a timeline, there was a schedule. And so I had to make sure that I wasn't being irresponsible with that too much, as much as Kevin and Pablo were patient with me, coming in saying, you really need to do this or that by this date. But I really did not try. If I wanted to edit the sequence in a certain way, I just did. And it wasn't any difference than me cutting, In the Heights or Tick, Tick, Boom or Crazy Rich Asians. It was very performance driven and whatever were the needs of the scene dramatically. And if anything, it gave me more tools in my toolbox to play with. Well, I actually need or want this shot. Can you guys pull this off? Or is that and also trying to restrain myself because, something Jon Chu and I said a lot to ourselves is like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. Just because we can make something doesn't mean we should do that. And so we just had to pick our moments when we we're trying to stretch VFX. But at the end of the day, I just try to do what I do as an editor, which is be a clear storyteller.
Yeah, and sometimes we contribute to that because we see what Myron is trying to do or is doing, and then there might be some things that Jon or Myron don't know, because we are the first ones who see, for instance, what the greenery is doing, or how does it start and how does it end, and what kinds of things do we have in the middle. And then as we show the animation of the greenery as a whole, from a kind of a proscenium kind of a point of view, do we want to feature that in the middle of it? So that changes Myron's,
Totally.
it increases and it makes it better.
Yeah.
Because now we're contributing to information. The other thing that I found, and this is a difficult thing because it's very difficult to cut something in when you haven't shot anything. So especially with creatures that are not on set. Yes, we did have the animal unit, but a lot of the times, some of the shots weren't shot there because they weren't thought of, or because we didn't see the performances that Ariana and Cynthia were doing. And so picking up on their performances, there was a place to put insert work of creature close-up work, especially on the sequences. So that changes also the way Myron thinks about it. And I try, Myron, to be very respectful of what you're trying to do, because you are very respectful of what we're doing. But in a sense, sometimes information, you don't have that information. So we provide it. I mean, it's up to Jon and Myron to do whatever they want with it. But that also has to do with the differences between a musical and a cinema experience, in which in musical, you're in proscenium, you're just taking a look at the whole thing. Things are sometimes exaggerated because you're far away from the action and you want to get, the general idea. But if you actually take a look at Glinda's face or Alphaba's face on a close-up, maybe they change their eyebrow in a specific way. And that means, like we always say, ambiguity or guilt or hope. And we want to put there something that was eliciting that from a creature. And then we copy those kinds of things, or we reverberate, and that's part of the animation. And so that's also different than calling action on a set and having the cast actor giving something back to the filmmaking. So it's a completely different process.
Pablo, when you're talking about the animals, I'm reminded of another scene on my list, and that's No Place Like Home, where the animals are going underground and Elphaba shows up. There's a lot of interaction.
You basically take a look at Elphaba's performance as a close-up. She comes in. If you actually take a look at the scene, what is the scene about? That scene is a very complex scene. If I remember correctly, there's like 8 pages, in which the first she comes in and sees a hole in the middle of the yellow brick road. By the way, it's a hole in the middle of the yellow brick road. It's not somewhere else. It's in the middle of it. So they're making a hole in the wizard's plans. So there comes, a bunch of animals. Elphaba doesn't know where they're going, so there's a little bit of an exchange there. It seems like they're changing their mind. Then the lion shows up. Well, first Dulce Bear shows up, and then there's that emotion of getting back to the first movie, and then the lion shows up, and then everybody changes their mind. So the scene goes like, snaking around all kinds of ways. Very difficult. I mean, we shot there for a couple of weeks. It was Cynthia and the animal unit, and that's about it. Now, if I remember correctly, we thought when we shot it that it was about 10, 15 animals. Well, they ended up, 100 and something.
Yeah, we always times like 10 every time. There's monkeys that are like, well, can we make it an army instead of like a infantry unit? Can we make this now a $10 million sequence versus 200,000? It's amazing how important that synergy is between editorial and VFX for a sequence like No Place Like Home, because we didn't really know if this sequence was going to work until basically we were done. There was a lot of patience with developing how many animals, what kind of animals, should we have flying monkeys at all in this scene? If so, when do they show up? What are they listening to? When are they listening to it? Do these animals start to believe Elphaba, and how do they, and at what point do they believe Elphaba, and do we think that she's convincing them? And then when does the Cowardly Lion come in? Should the Cowardly Lion cut off Elphaba's last note to the song, or should we have that note of the song finish? And then, there's constant back and forth between screen direction, really the simple things that actually are quite complicated, and crossing the line, and how do we do it? And Alphabet's all over that set, and how to build it into a climax, and how to have the cape start to billow like a flag, like the French freedom flag or something. And that just took forever to figure out with each other, and just so much back and forth between all of us.
Well, another scene where animals play a big part, and also in watching it, Myron, you had to make a lot of editorial decisions. I'm thinking of is the when Glinda and Fiero are having the wedding, but at the same time we're intercutting with this secret prison where all of the animals have been locked up.
It's interesting that you bring up how that was shot because I remember at the beginning, Myron, of your edit, those scenes were completely different scenes. They were completely at different times. But I remember the feeling that I got the first time that I saw, oh, he's putting it all together. That makes sense. And all the angles make sense because we're going from, butterflies and very colorful into very dark sequence with a bunch of imprisoned creatures. So no, they weren't shot at the same time. They were completely two different sequences, but they were happening at the same time in the continuity of the movie. But it was a little bit of a twist there. I mean, editorially, it was like, it's just tidying up just a little bit. But look what happens there. But look at what's happening right there. So, I mean, we all appreciated that. It was really great to see.
It was funny because the scenes were scripted to be individual scenes, and there was actual concern from the studio to deliver on the wish fulfillment of Glinda's wedding. Everyone wants to see Ariana Grande get married. And with butterflies, come on, yellow butterflies, look at the yellow brick road. I mean, before we were even intercutting those scenes, we were already making the trailer shot of Glinda with the yellow butterflies. And to Pablo's point, by the discovery of the intercutting, it actually elevated both of those scenes as much as we wanted to deliver on the wish fulfillment of Glinda's wedding. It was about the juxtaposition. It was about all the delight and wonder of Oz and the dark side of Oz being intercut with each other, and that both of those scenes get elevated. And you start to forget about that again, because it's just outstanding work, that these are all empty plates that Cynthia's acting to, and there is no animals in any of these cages. So it's all created to be integrated, and you're just getting lost in this wedding and this discovery by Elphaba. And it's a real feat. And the back and forth with the butterflies, getting those right. There was so many conversations as far as like, how do the butterflies interact? Which ones, cross the frame, how many butterflies, what do they look like when they're on the ground? If I'm adding a shot, an aerial shot, how should we feature them there? Again, just to get lost in all of that after you sort of do this, experiment with the intercutting, and that all works. And then you have to have, VFX or real deliver that sequence.
It's funny because when you were describing it, it is the same as writing a book or writing a scene on a script. It has to be there, and it is about communication. It's about choosing the right words and putting them in the right order, and having a real understanding of what kind of time you have to communicate that to somebody. And those people cannot be they have to be not only entertained, but they need to understand how this one scene belongs into the whole story. That's why those two scenes are playing at the same time, so that you're not just doing the wedding. You're doing the wedding, but you're also realizing that there is something else going on there. It's a pretty complicated stuff.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to go scene by scene through this entire movie. Let me open it to you guys. What are some of your favorite scenes that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, look, for me, no good deed and the power of that musical number, that it feels raw and intimate and also epic at the same time. And building out that sequence with ILM and Pablo, that is like nothing else for sure. So I could talk about that sequence until I'm blue in the face.
And that's the sequence where Elphaba goes to the castle. Fiera is turning into the scarecrow. There's monkeys with torches. We're doing flashbacks to the first film as it all kind of ties together.
Yeah, you want the power of that musical number to not be disrupted by a false note with VFX or the storytelling. And so we really have to work very hand in hand to make sure that all works correctly. And they shot a very much a skeleton of Kiamako Castle, basically just staircases and a couple of trap doors, and the rest of it was all blue screen. And so my job was just to be, mindful that again I could pick any kind of performance I wanted. I had all these incredible crane shots. I had all these amazing camera angles, but I also wanted the power of being on Elphaba's face. And there's so much about, of course, the monkeys, but then the cape, comes off of her and then comes back on her end at the end of the number, and so much of the grimoire. And, just 2 years before, we were just developing what the grimoire looked like. Like, wait, does the grimoire have any like symbols on it? And now it's like full-fledged grimoire, like on steroids. And so it's really a pinnacle of all the R&D and all the back and forth, all artists. It's like this is what we've sort of built to, was a set piece like this. But at the same time, we don't want it to be out of control. As much as it is very epic, you still want to feel the power of Cynthia's performance. And so, just hats off to Pablo and ILM to like keep, it from just sputtering out of control.
Yep, and that it did. But no, but I mean, I think it's really important because I think it goes back to what is the scene about. And actually, all of us, starting with understanding that this is a scene where the witch, takes ownership and decides, screw this, I'm trying to do the good thing here, but obviously doesn't work, and I'm going to become who they want me to become, and now we're going to business. So that is the first thing that you need all of the artists to understand, that from a visual effects point of view. And once we do that, then we start, taking a look at the exploration of the space, because that thing started very, very small, if you remember. I mean, and then it ended up being 300 by 200 feet or something like that of stuff that was in the background, complement analysis, lighting with, torches. We knew we had to put torches, but not huge torches like that,
Mhm.
because we're complementing the lighting. And then you have not only Alphaba's, drama or her journey, it's kind of like almost at the end of her arc, isn't it? But it's also what happens, when filmmaking goes beyond that and takes a look at background stuff. What are the monkeys doing? What geographically, where are we seeing? Where is the sun? Where is the waterfalls that were part of the first movie? And as we move the camera around, do we cheat the sun so that if you actually take a look at it, we are cheating the sun all the way there, because we all know that things look either side-lit or backlit usually. I mean, they're the best lighting there is. And so we all put together, it's a good, 4 or 5 minutes of typical filmmaking. And also, which we haven't really talked about a little bit, it's like the music just brings it all back in.
Mhm.
Because now the music, we could have all the resources and the time and the space in the world in which we have a sandbox, but the music kind of like brings it back in. It limits the way we do things sometimes. Perfect example would be the red flashes in the sky. The storm. What do they
Mhm.
say? How do they emphasize what she's trying to say? And how do we all acquire that as filmmakers? We do it in dailies with all of us. And I think I heard John say this before, that sometimes the movie kind of like becomes the movie in front of you.
Mhm.
There are certain things that happen right there. Because when we shot it, those red flashes weren't part of the equation, but the singing was. And the singing was very poignant right there. So we needed to emphasize that.
Mhm.
So a lot of fun, like I said, a lot of very creative and a bunch of producers throwing up in the corner, kind of a thing.
And there's tiny little things in that sequence, like you had mentioned the flashback skid, where John and I really wanted those flashbacks to feel violent. So we were desaturating them, and then we started talking to them about maybe trying to do something that's sort of a further develop of these vision idea that we established in the first film, but they felt almost kind of diseased in a way, and they almost feel like bubbling celluloid meets cells being divided, and those little textures are feeding into the rot and the pain and the anger of and the desperation of this musical number. And so I just love it's all in the details, and then you have this really beautiful, seamless flashback where she's thinking about Nessa and Dilliman, which is a really hard thing to pull off as far as like all these plates put together. That way it doesn't look too cheesy. And then you get to Fierro and that pain comes back, and then you come back to the shot and like all the stalks of the corn are popping out of the floor, and we kept just saying to Pablo, like, we want it more and more violent. Like, it has to be violent. It can't be smooth. And he was like, what the hell? What the heck does that mean? It's like I got to tell my artist, I don't know. They said violent, just make it. And he's interpreting our mad scientist notes, trying, but it's all these back and forth, and me trying to coax it with the edit, of course. But then, part of a big job that I just think that people don't realize is that I'm the co-parent with John as far as nurturing this baby into existence, and so John and I are like tag teaming the entire time, and we're not getting up on Pablo. We're just like, Pablo, just get into our heads. Like, hey, it all make sense? He's like, yeah, whatever, buddy. No, he's just like, there's so much about that specific sequence is about the discussion about how to develop every single moment in that sequence.
And then let me just go back to producers throwing up in the corner, because I think that Kevin Elam is a great visual effects producer and he's a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're always, he's always trying to figure out how to make things happen. You couldn't have a better partner right there.
He never said no. He never said no. And he was always just trying to figure out. He was so patient with us, even when it was like, it wasn't even a like red line. We'd crossed that red line like weeks ago, and just giving us more time to play, and he would always just say, I'm going to give you as much time to play. That way you don't feel locked in. That's the key. It's actually not about money. It's just about time.
And it's kind of an interesting point, because you always wonder, do you actually finish a project? Because I don't think I've ever have. I think you just abandon it and you just kind of like run out of time. And nobody's to blame for trying to make the best movie that they could possibly can make. And so, sure, you're going to run into the wall at some point, but it's what it is.
Just to add just two more little sequences is, the iconic shots of the tornado with the house. That scene I'm really proud of, because so much of that was created with VFX and editorial, where we were pitching shots back and forth, and having known that ILM had just worked on Twisters, I'm just like, well, they've been RDing tornadoes for years. But then we're like, but this one has a house in it. And it's now approaching Munchkin Land. There might be some corn stalks somewhere there, like in the Midwest, but otherwise, just so that sequence, meant a lot to me to be able to develop in editorial, and then to then pitch to John and say, what do you think? And then John would add his sort of take to it. And then the other thing is the ending of the movie, to make that feel just classic and timeless and beautiful, to make it feel like something like we're watching the end of Casablanca, or The Sound of Music. to make it just feel very timeless and beautiful, to have this impassable desert where Elphaba and Fiyero are crossing these sand dunes and making that so beautiful, and then having Glinda, on the top of the building, out on the balcony, looking at the rainbow, and just making that all sort of beautiful and grand. That those simplistic and beautiful moments are just as powerful to me as something like No Good Deed was in as a set piece.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a typical sequence in which if you ever get lost, you look at the performances and the singing
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it's all about. I mean, we can do all kinds of things in the back, it doesn't matter.
But you didn't get in the way of that. You didn't get in the way. You just raised the ante of that and supported
Sure.
it. And it's just like I keep mentioning this sort of analogy, but it's like playing a classical guitar. Any false note, you're going to hear it. And I just think that when VFX has to support just some real delicate performance, and just you just can't, if you start to just cheesify this thing at the last minute, then you're going to just lose everybody.
Sure, it could be too on the nose. It's a real problem there. I agree, and I think it's also a good example of how things change from 4 years to 4 years later.
Mm.
When I remember, because I remember the original storyboards for the desert scene, and there was all these there was the rainbows right there, and there was a lot of sparkles there, and for me at that point, when I was taking a look at that, I was thinking, this is not part of our movie. It's very not grounded. And how are we going to do that?
Hmm.
It took 4 years to develop there. And then all that turned into, the sparkles on the sand. Couldn't be more grounded than that.
Hmm.
And it turned into the rainbow that gets generated out of rain, not just a rainbow that we see. It's if you actually take a look at the render of that rainbow, it's textured, it moves,
Hmm.
meaning that there's rain right there and it's happening. So all that came together, at the end as something that it clarified that original idea.
Well, it is a close on Wicked for Good. I mean, I have been reading some rumors about ideas for Wicked 3. You guys know where you want to take this, or after you get your vacations, of course, before they kick off another visit to this
I
world.
think we have a little time to figure this one out, but yeah, yeah, let's celebrate and take in the last 3 to 4 years of work, and yeah, we can think about how to revisit Oz maybe after we get to sleep a little.
The movie's doing great. We're rolling into awards season. I'm sure it's going to make a lot of lists. What is next for each of you? Again, besides this sort of getting through the next couple of months of publicity, what other projects you guys working on? We're going to see your work.
The door is wide open for this gentleman right here. I think that I've been, I feel very grateful that I've been working straight for 3 years, while much of the industry, there's been a downturn. And I just feel very grateful that I've had, just straight work, and I've been able to employ a very big crew. And we'll see what happens next year, whether it's with Jon or some incredible new filmmaker. I'm not sure, but, I'd love to just keep pushing my craft and, hopefully get better at what I do, and whatever that is, I look forward to.
Yeah, same thing. I think that if at all, I started thinking 4 years ago that at the end of the 4 years, we were all going to be different people, and I think we are. And I think you take, like I said, I always learn from anything I do, and so looking forward to other things other than retirement, and you take whatever you have with you inside of you to the next project. So looking forward to it.
Well, whatever the future holds, I know you're both glad to have this film out there. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. Great having you here.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Skid. Appreciate it.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline, one word, .biz. That's BIZ. If you're new to the podcast, you should check out our archives, where there are more than 270 past episodes for your listening enjoyment. You can peruse those at our website, belowtheline.biz, or wherever you get podcasts. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. If you want to support us, consider a purchase. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Other ways you can help. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcasts. Second, tell your friends about an episode you enjoyed, because that's how we gain new listeners. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.